Hey everyone, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 1st of February, 2023. And on today's show, 3 big takeaways from the release of the 2023 Big 12 football schedule. Also, we'll touch on a big night in Big 12 hoops with Kansas taking down Kansas State, evening their season series at 1 apiece. Are the Jayhawks back? And some thoughts from that game, but more breakdown of that Big 12 football schedule coming up right now.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today brought to you all by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America, and the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Not in my normal setting today. I am downstairs in my home looking after little Bowie, who is our dog. He's got a cough right now, so he cannot go to daycare. I'm sitting watching him watch out the window looking for birds and whatnot. But back to normal setting right now. We've got the old Yeti mic set up, but if the sound sounds more hollow today, it's because it is. I'm in a larger room. We're back to our normal setting tomorrow, but for right now, enjoy my my living area space downstairs. So make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at JoshNeighbors_. Please subscribe to the channel. We got over 3,200 subscribers, which was our goal by the end. I think we did by the end of February or January. Please help us hit that next goal of 3,208 right now. So the goal 3,300 by the end of February. Please do that. Please subscribe. Let your friends know all of those things. So we're one day removed from the release of the Big 12 football schedule. We reacted to it live yesterday, kind of going through everybody's schedule, and I've had some time to think about it, and I've got a few takeaways, just some general stuff. And I think that Brett Yormark, there wasn't some big rollout. They didn't go to like New York City and do this, New York media blitz or whatever. And there was so much talk about when's it coming. I think they picked a good time. I know today is signing day, and we'll have some more coverage on that once it's over, because there's really not a whole lot of big time, prospects to discuss at this point. But I think it's smart they picked the day before. So there really wasn't a whole lot happening besides, the college world, at least besides hoops and the Senior Bowl. So there's stuff going on, but it's not really college football related, right? And it's also a day removed from the AFC and NFC championship games happening. So, that kind of the initial reaction and the talk anticipated. I mean, so much so that we saw Travis Kelce at the KU Kansas State game last night, which also generated some buzz. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And so, I think it was pretty good timing. I think we were all ready for it. Everybody was fired up for it. Everybody could pay attention to it. And so some thoughts. Number one, Oklahoma and Texas did not get screwed on the way out. And on the way out, it sounds like right now the momentum is heading towards Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 in 2024, right? After 2024, I'd say. As of right now, they're scheduled to leave in 2025, but I don't think most folks believe that's going to be the case. And I think that's especially true because of the fact that I've maintained this, that UCLA and USC are headed to the Big Ten after this coming football season. And because we believe that the Big Ten and the SEC are the two big powers, I think ESPN and co. wants their full complement of teams. Disney would like the full complement with the SEC, which they have the exclusive rights to, start coming up pretty soon here. And also the Big Ten and Fox, they have at the same time. So the SEC would like to get those teams all together at the same time. With that in mind, so they can kind of both be on the same page, you'd think that some kind of negotiation will go down and some kind of deal will be struck. That's the indication that everybody's gotten. Now, we saw yesterday, as of right now, the final Bedlam game is slated to be played in Norman, but it feels like this will be the final year. And so the Big 12 did not schedule it low like it was going to be their final year. Like they didn't make sure that they had the toughest way out possible. And there's a couple ways they did that. Number one, there are no divisions. If the Big 12 wanted to prioritize the not demise of OU in Texas, but to maximize the damage of OU in Texas, or that could be done to them, or even minimize the damage on their front, they could have made two divisions and which would have kept out OU and Texas from together, making the Big 12 championship game next year, which while unlikely, there is a possibility due to the talent level on both of those teams, due to Oklahoma's winning ways. And also, I think a lot of folks will be picking Texas to win the league next year. Say what you want about Texas being back, but because they were 8-4, because they added a lot more, and because their talent relative to the rest of the league is pretty good, you think they might. Oklahoma, once again, always a very talented team. Bad year last year. We'll see if they can rebound, but we saw TCU go from 5-7 all the way up to an undefeated year up until that Big 12 championship game. So that is possible. And I think Oklahoma's got a pretty favorable schedule. So I think the divisions would have been the best way that make sure, hey, look, only one team from each division goes to the Big 12 championship game. And with OU and Texas in the same division, it obviously would not have been possible. They did not do that. They elected not to go in that direction, which to me is smart. I thought I like the no divisions. I think the fact the Big 12, after screwing themselves the first time around, back in 14-15, I think it was 14, whatever year it was, with TCU and Baylor and the 1-through champion, and them not being 1-through champion, them being co-champions. I think the creation of the Big 12 title game helped them out. I like the way that they did the conference. I did not like the fact they did not have a title game. You add that extra title game, it is more money. It is obviously, it is a television event, and it kind of one more extra game to prove who your winner is. Not let them get knocked out of the Big 12 or out of the college ball playoff with that, situation, with that format, if you will. And so as we're seeing other leagues start to come around to that, the Pac-12, I think the Big 10 will eventually. I think there's just going to be too much momentum for that to happen, right? I think we're tired of seeing, like, I'm at least of watching, and no disrespect to Purdue and Iowa and all those places, they can win those games, but normally it's those Northwestern, Wisconsin, Iowa, Purdue, lambs heading to the slaughter against Ohio State, as of late against Michigan. And so I think that, while we might see a rematch of Ohio State, Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, it's better off for the league. And I don't think you're going to get that every single year, obviously. It's tough to do that. Those are two really good teams, though. We might see it sometimes. But, hey, who's going to say no to another Ohio State-Michigan game? I certainly will not. Also, I think the ACC was heading that way. SEC, we'll see. I've heard, are they going to do pods within a division? Are they going to do no divisions? What are they going to do there? I'm not sure. But, I think there have been years where the SEC West was dominant. The SEC East would go, here's 9-3 Florida, right? Or, I know there were good Missouri teams, my alma mater, but they were not always the best teams. There was one year that could have made championship, but sometimes the two best teams could come from the SEC West, right? And you might have a rematch. Or sometimes there's some years where an East and West team are the best two teams, but you kind of make sure that you can get the best two teams. Now, with that in mind, it can sometimes be difficult because, not everybody plays everybody, and therein lies the issue. But still, I think the round robin style where you play predominantly everybody, or at least everyone you can, with a 9-game conference schedule, you're going to miss 4 teams, obviously, but still you're going to play everybody as much as you can, as often as you can. And look, somebody's going to get lucky. I'll get to that in a little bit here. But with the actual schedules for these teams, I think they also got a little bit of a break. And I'll tell you guys what I mean right here, sharing my screen so I can show you all on Twitter. So when you go to OU's schedule, notice once again, Arkansas State, SMU at Tulsa, and they have at Cincinnati, which will be a big game. But Cincinnati, guys, is really, that's a program in flux right now. Luke Fickell's most successful coach, most successful time in program history. It had a down year for their standards last year. Scott Satterfield's now their coach, and I think he's a good coach. Was a sitting Power 5 coach from Louisville, but not sure how good they're going to be. Obviously, it'll be a great atmosphere. Then they've got Iowa State at home, and then they've got Red River. And so that is not like it could be a difficult stretch. You could say that this middle stretch right here of Cincy on the road, Iowa State, and then Texas is challenging, right? And they will play one home game from the 16th until the 21st. They have another one again. So it's a month where they're at home one time, sure. But you look at that backstretch, UCF at home, KU and Oklahoma State on the road, West Virginia at home. The tough part is BYU, TCU. So their schedule is divided nicely. There's really no murderer's row stretch of games, right? And I would say a murderer's row, like I think 3 games constitutes an awfully difficult stretch. You might say Red River, UCF, and KU is difficult. Okay, sure, but they are coming out. They have a bye week in the middle. You might think UCF at KU and Oklahoma State is difficult. Sure, but they've dominated KU and they've dominated Oklahoma State, and they're going to be playing UCF at home. Well, what about, at Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and BYU? I mean, yeah, maybe it's a little challenging with the two road games, but BYU is not a great team this year, and there's no guarantee that they're going to be a really good team this season as well. There's the next year, I should say. There's no guarantee of that. So I think West Virginia at BYU and TCU is tough, but you get 2 or 3 of those at home, to wrap up the season. And so I would say Oklahoma, that's a pretty favorable schedule, I would say. And I think it's also safe to say, I know that there's been a lot of whatting and moaning on social media about referees and whatnot, but I don't buy that kind of stuff. I think the best teams win the games they should. And I think with this is clear too. There is nobody trying to screw them on the way out. Texas, on the other hand, if they wanted to make the case, sure, they could, but the reason why is different. Look at the Longhorn schedule. That at Alabama game makes things more challenging because in the first 6 games they play, 3 of them are on the road against at Alabama, at Baylor, and Red River. So a neutral site. So 2 roads and a neutral against the 3 toughest teams in that stretch. That's a huge challenge for them. And then you look after the bye, and they have that nice middle bye as well. You look at the back half, Houston, BYU, K-State, TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. There are a few sections in there that I would qualify as a murderer's row, right? I would say that K-State defending champ, and then on the road against runner-up TCU, and on the road at Jack Trice is going to be a difficult step. And I think that there's a good chance Iowa State could be playing some of their better football at the end of the season. Or you might even take that stretch right there afterwards at TCU, Iowa State on the road as well, and then Texas Tech at home. Or you can just take this entire, not even just murder's row, 4 games right here, K-State, TCU, Iowa State, Texas Tech. That's a very challenging stretch. Now, Texas has more talent than all of those teams. I agree. But K-State, we've seen their quality. And I think they'll be looking to get some revenge from last year, although it will be on the road. TCU has had Texas's number a lot recently as of late. Last year was no exception to that rule. Iowa State, we know how tough Jack Trice is to go and win. And also, Texas Tech got themselves a big win last year against Texas. They have some confidence that they can beat the Longhorns. So you look at that stretch, guys, of games they have on the road at Bama, at Baylor, at OU neutral site, Houston on the road, TCU and Iowa State on the road. I mean, they're going to some of the tougher venues in the league, right? McLean Stadium is a tough place to go and win. I know K-State did it last year, but that Baylor team, if they're playing well, I think earlier in the season we'll get a good assessment of them. But, I mean, that's going to be a big game for Baylor, and they obviously want to be paying some revenge back to Texas for the loss. We never know with Red River. You think that, I know you really can't blame the league that much because the Bama game obviously is not in their control, so that complicates things a bit. But it does make it hard, and I will say that back stretch for Texas does, generally speaking, just look challenging. So if you want to say they got screwed there, sure, whatever. I mean, Houston, BYU is like a weird stretch. I'm not really sure what you can say about that. But they'll have a week to prepare for Houston. So like that there is, I will say, if Texas thinks they got screwed, sure, whatever. It's a challenging schedule, but I don't think it's one that's made up, that's just completely done to screw them out, right? Because these are teams they play, where do you flip anybody out, right? Where do you put an easier game earlier on in the schedule for the Longhorns? And this is a year for them where they have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games. And then there's the Red River neutral game there as well. So Texas has a tougher of the 2 schedules, but overall, if you look at that and the no divisions, I think they can't really complain about getting screwed per se on this front. There is so much that's unknown as my second point. And what I mean by that is it's really hard to define what some of these stretches are going to be like. So for example, and I guess I can kind of combine number 2 and number 3. Get down, Bowie. He's already up on something. It's hard to tell what a stretch for an Oklahoma State, what this means. UCF, Houston, and BYU, right? What's that going to mean? And I think there's some leagues where you can look ahead and you can say, all right, we know for a fact that stretch X or Y is going to be tough. So, for example, if you were to pull up I'll just go with my hometown team or my alma mater, Missouri Tigers football in 2023. And I think about what some of the stretches that they're going to have. So let's look at the schedule here. There is a stretch of games where they play LSU at Kentucky, South Carolina at Georgia. Oh, actually, here's a good stretch, for example. They've got at Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida in 3 straight games. I can promise you that's going to be a difficult stretch. You just know it's going to be a hard stretch. I'll give you LSU at Kentucky, Georgia, and South Carolina, then at Georgia. We know that's going to be a difficult stretch just because we know that like 3 of those teams are probably going to be very good. In this league, it can be hard when you throw in stretches of UCF, Houston. Oh my God, Bowie, get down. Come on. UCF, Houston, and BYU. I promise Bowie will not be as big a part of the show moving forward. It's just a one-off today. But how do you tell? How do you know if UCF, Houston, and BYU is tough, right? Like we don't know what those schools will look like after after 2 months of playing Big 12 football, after a week-to-week grind. What does it look like for Houston? And I'll just give you guys an example here. Like, what's Houston going to look like after they play West Virginia on Thursday night, Texas, then at K-State, at Baylor? Like, what does the last 3 weeks of the season look like? Are they out of gas? Are they hitting their stride? And I think a good example of this is Kansas. Like, Kansas got more talented last year, and their roster resembled more of a P5 roster. But for KU, they didn't just hit the scholarship limit until, recently, and they have not been able to do that. And so I've always mentioned like a big part of this is not just building depth, guys, but building Power 5 caliber depth, building guys who, building a depth chart where guys have speed and strength and durability and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, not every team can do it. It's difficult to do. But, think about teams that end up doing really well, the Kansas States, the TCUs of the world. Like TCU had 5 legitimate wide receivers. TCU had a really strong offensive line last year. TCU had a stable of very good running backs last year. It's about building up talent at that point. And I think, using a Texas or an Oklahoma is not a fair example because those guys get considerably more talent than the rest of the league does. But like, I think you're seeing right now the K-States and TCUs of the world start to build up that level of talent. The UCFs, the Cincy's, the Houstons, the BYUs, they've got guys, let's just say a Tank Dell, for example, or a McCaskill at running back for Houston. They've got guys that are really good players already, on their rosters. The problem is, I'm not saying there's 2 Tank Dells, but they don't have guys that can step up and replace, good freshmen that can come in and get a job done for you. They don't have that. They really don't have that. And so I think that's a big part of the unknown is what these stretches look like when you're playing these teams that are just adjusting to the league. And I think there's going to be a learning curve for all of these teams coming into the league. So I would say from that scheduling perspective, it is going to be more difficult to find those tough stretches. We really just don't, that include mostly the new teams, because there's so much that we don't know about those schools right now. All right, point 3 is coming your all's way in a second, but first, a word from our friends at FanDuel. Guys, the FanDuel Sportsbook is the #1 sportsbook, also the official sports betting partner of the National Football League. And you guys know what is coming up here in a week and a half, I guess now, right? We have the Super Bowl coming up in a week and a half. There's no better place to get in on the action today than the FanDuel Sportsbook. And we have got a deal for you all right now. What you guys need to do is go to the FanDuel Sportsbook. You guys can go to fanduel.com/locked-on, and you guys can bet. There's a bunch of ways to bet in the Super Bowl. I mean, you guys have not checked this out yet. They got money line, point spreads, player props. You can bet on how long the national anthem will be. You guys can bet on stuff that has to do with the halftime show. And best of all, you guys can get paid instantly. So join FanDuel today at fanduel.com/locked-on. You guys can claim your first no sweat bet on Super Bowl 57, and you guys can get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win once again at the FanDuel Sportsbook today. You guys can go there and check that out. I want to thank FanDuel for sponsoring the show. All right, so my final of the three big takeaways that I've got right now from the schedule release is the next one, the two schools that really got gifts. The two schools that I feel like got significant gifts in terms of the scheduling, and those two schools are Cincinnati and Oklahoma State. Now, that being said, we've got no clue if they can take advantage of these gifts they've got. That's why I said, can they capitalize? So if we zero in here on that Cincinnati schedule, all right, that first stretch, yeah, it's difficult. At Pitt is tough. Miami of Ohio, Oklahoma comes to them, and then BYU on the road on a Friday night. Sure, it could be difficult. Iowa State after the bye. Iowa State, Baylor at home, Oklahoma State on the road, then UCF at home. I mean, the only really tough road stretch, they only have one time where it's back-to-back road games, guys. And, it's the end of the year. It's Houston, West Virginia. So it's a team they know in Houston. And also it's going to be a regional rival in West Virginia. But, guys, who knows what shape they're going to be in at that point of the year. All of these teams from Oklahoma State throughout the rest of the way were in rough shape at the end, or, exception of UCF, right? But, I'm not really sure if we can say they're in rough shape. Just, they were a really good team last year, but it's AAC good. So we're not sure we can say the same this year. Oklahoma State banged up. Houston was not 100% last year. That team did not play 100%. West Virginia was in a bad way at the end of last year, especially with not really, the quarterback situation got a little dicey there towards the end. And then KU at the end of the season, we saw them, obviously they made the bowl game and whatnot, but they really lost steam down the stretch. They lost pretty handily against K-State, and they lost handily against Texas. Now, I know Jalen Daniels had just come back, but still, they lost pretty handily there. So I have to say, and also notice who you don't see up here in this stretch. Who are the four teams, that finished top four in the Big 12 last year? It was TCU, number one team ends up being K-State, but in the end of the year, regular season rankings, standings, TCU was 1, K-State was 2, Texas was 3, and then also Texas Tech was 4. I don't see any of those schools. On Cincinnati's schedule. So Cincinnati avoids the top 4 teams from the 2022 football standings. That is fantastic. Now, do they have the personnel on Scott Satterfield's team to do something with this? I've got absolutely no idea. I would lean towards no, is what it sounds like right now, but that's a big question. And then let's go all the way down now to Texas Tech. I'll go to their schedule, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State will go to their schedule right here. So that first 4 games: Central Arkansas at ASU, South Alabama at Iowa State. That is difficult, but not unmanageable. Having to go 2 Power 5 teams on the road in your first 4, sure, but you should beat South Al, you should beat Central Arkansas, and let's be honest, the ASU program is still in a pretty significant rebuild. Now, do they upgrade big time with Kenny Dillingham? Yes. Iowa State on the road is very difficult, but I feel like Oklahoma State could win there. I'm not sure how good that Iowa State team is going to be next year, but that's really a tough one. And then you go the rest of the way, a bye week for your home for the 2 Kansas schools. You get K-State on a Friday night at West Virginia. I'm curious about how tough a road game that's going to be. And then you get a 2-game homestand here with Cincy and Oklahoma. Bedlam, obviously a big game. These are 2 teams, big rivalry games, so you want to beat them. Cincinnati, you should be able to beat them. And then you got 2 road games. I mean, 3 of your last 4 or 4 of your last 5 are going to be the new teams in the league. And they're all coming, once again, 4 of your last 5. We've got no idea if these schools have the depth to stand up. And I know the fan bases will say, yes, we do. But guys, you don't know that until you go through it. Even some of the Big 12 schools. I mean, Oklahoma State was a top 10 team last year. And as soon as they lost some depth, it was a complete disaster for them. Spencer Sanders, they were losing guys in the back end, left and right. And you see what happens, and it can fall apart for you. We've got no idea. I know it goes back to the unknown part, but 4 of your last 5 being in Orlando and Houston also in November. I mean, like, you're going to be in good shape in terms of weather. You feel like you're going to be in good shape in terms of, like not overly crazy. I know the bounce house gets going, but like, I'm sure a good number of Oklahoma State fans are making that first trip there. And so it's not like this massive stadium. It's impossible to win in. Houston, they'll be fired to play Oklahoma State, but I think it's an environment that there'll be plenty of pokes there as well. And then you're home for BYU. And what BYU looks like at the end, I'm not sure. Guys, there are a lot of problems with this Oklahoma State roster. They have got a lot of holes on it. Can they fill them? Is the coaching a problem? I don't think the X's and O's are a problem. Maybe on offense they are right now. But the Mike Gundy, every single time he's pressed and asked to adapt, a little bit of fighting first, and then eventually he does adapt. Will he this time around? I mean, I still think he's one of the best coaches in the league, but is Mike Gundy, the prideful guy, going to stop Mike Gundy, the football coach, from doing his thing, doing a good job this year? I don't know. We'll have to see. They pull a lot of guys for some weird places, whether it be the defensive coordinator, whether it be tight ends, whether it be wide receivers. They've got some guys from some places I've never even heard of. But their schedule is a bit more favorable to me than some other places that have it. All right, a quick word from our sponsors, and I want to tie up with end up here with some basketball things. Today's show is brought to you all by Built Bars, and the great news is, guys, you can now find Built Bars at Sam's Club and Walmart. Built Bars are great. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They taste very good, and they've got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And once again, you don't have to wait for Built to ship anymore. You guys can head to Walmart or Sam's Club right now. You guys can get the 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut, or you guys can go to Sam's Club and go big with a 13-bar box with hit flavors such as brownie batter and churro. You guys can thank me later. Once again, Built Bar available now. Big result last night, guys, in the Big 12 in terms of basketball. I think actually 2 pretty significant results. Number 1, Kansas does a good job kind of pacing their way past K-State. I will say this, that game got dangerous at times, and K-State never let it get away from them. So I was actually pretty impressed with how K-State played last night. Definitely, to me, more of a legitimate Big 12 title contender than I was anticipating, even after they started playing well. To me, that's the second. They're in Texas. And then a reminder last night, really, as once again, Bowie likes to get involved in this show. A reminder last night that when DeJuan Harris wants to be aggressive, Kansas is an incredibly dangerous team. Kansas can bring the heat when DeJuan Harris is looking for his shot. He's attacking. He's hitting floaters. He's making threes. I mean, I think guys – good Lord. I think guys were they were seeing him come their way, and they were thinking, all right, DeJuan Harris, he's probably going to end up passing it off. No, man, he was aggressive last night, and I like that. And because that team lacks depth, they're going to need that kind of aggression. They need DeJuan Harris to get after it. And so when they've got Harris going, Grady Dick and McCullough contributing, and Jalen Wilson, basically in a way where it doesn't always all fall on Jalen Wilson all the time. He's a great player, and they need him to play well, obviously. But it's great if they can help him out somewhat, and DeJuan Harris did last night. And I thought I was very impressed by that. And it's good to see guys like Pettiford getting some more run, because they're going to need those guys not to play well, but just not to be disasters when it comes tournament time. And they need to give these guys some breaks just for a few minutes so they can perform better. So that was big. TCU over West Virginia with a limited Eddie Lampkin and no Mike Miles. Thought that was really impressive. West Virginia did a good job of keeping that in close. They're on a little bit of a roll right now. They are a tournament team, but they had a really good opportunity to go to TCU and to sweep the Horned Frogs yesterday, or on the season series, which would have been a huge notch in the belt for their NCAA tournament hopes. But TCU's not replacement guys, but the whole gang got involved last night and helped secure that victory, which I thought was really impressive for Jamie Dixon's group. I've said this a bunch. I'll say it again. I don't see them as a Big 12 championship team, as a team that's going to win the Big 12 regular season title. The big key for them, though, with all of this is they get healthy and they get all of their guys back in time for the NCAA tournament, because we know what that version could be. But seeing Shada Wells, 16 points, 5 assists on 7 of 10 shooting. Damian Ball with 16 points. And then a big night for Xavier Cork, who had 15 and 4, 2 blocks. He was fantastic, guys. he was 6 for 6 from the floor. And also they had Coles come off the bench and give them 17 points. So the fact that they're getting contributions from Jacoby Coles and Xavier Cork, and those guys are doing things like, scoring 17 points to them off the bench, that's huge. I think that's really exciting for Jamie Dixon's team, because now when you add back Lampkin and you add back Miles, you think about a team that's got Miles, Baugh, Wells, Miller, Cork, O'Bannon, Coles, Peavy. I mean, they've got all of these guys who are in there and contributing for them, and that's legitimate depth, and that's dangerous in the NCAA tournament, especially when that depth can score. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You guys can find the show at LOBig12 as well. Make sure you guys subscribe on Twitter. Please do that. It's very helpful. And also, you guys can find the podcast wherever you guys get your podcast. So next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.